Hello and welcome. In this tutorial series, you will learn how to use the new thruster tools in Houdini 21. After completing each part, you will create different thruster layers that will be combined into complex jet engine flame. We will then complete our scene by bringing all the elements together for our final render in Solaris. Alright, let's jump in. So you will have this start file provided with this lesson. And if we jump into this thruster engine effects geometry container, you would see that there is a file here that brings in this rocket. And we are going to start creating our thruster effects inside of it. So you can press tab and type thruster. And you'll see that there are going to be two options. First is pyro thruster exhaust, which will just load the tool. So if I just click on it and put it down, you would see that we will have, by clicking on the display flag, we'll just have a simple flame. And the other option, if you press tab and type thruster, okay, let's try again. Okay. You'll find the pyro configure thruster exhaust. So this will put down a recipe that would combine multiple different thruster layers and LopNet to render them. So you can place it anywhere in your scene. And let's give it a second to calculate. So you would see this one has definitely more interesting dynamics and it is moving through time. So we will explore this a bit later. For now, I just want you to focus on this one node and let's see what settings do we have, because we will rebuild basically our own custom thruster that would have these interesting rings and interior details, and this will be basically built from multiple layers. All right, but this is a great resource to study how you can combine different thrusters. So definitely play around with this. Right, so let's start with this one. The first tab is the general parameters such as length. So you can increase the length of the thruster, and then you can increase the scale of the origin of the flame. The voxel size is mainly responsible for the resolution. This will create two VDB fields. One is density, the other one is temperature, which is mainly going to be used inside of the rendering and material setup. So at the moment, the voxel size of 0.1 is working well. If you want faster feedback, you can increase the voxel size. It will basically generate less voxels and you'll have a much faster feedback in your viewport. For now, I'm just going to stick with 0.1. Okay, so we have this setup and we have our basically rocket engine. So let's see how we can attach this to the part of this engine that we need for our shot. Oh, as you can see, this pyro thruster exhaust has an input which suggests that you need to connect a single polygon. As you can see, single polygon with normal. So the normal would dictate the direction of the thruster. So for example, if I create a simple circle made of polygons, and let's see if it has normals. Yeah, it has the direction. Basically, you can see the direction is in positive Z. And if I plug this into the thruster exhaust, it will create the flame exactly on top of this circle polygons. So if I change the direction, if I put a transform node, for example, here, and if I rotate this, let's say 90 degrees, the thruster will be oriented up. And same if I would do 90 degrees down. So something like this would be great if you want to simulate like a smaller jets. There are a lot of examples online where you can use these thrusters. So I recommend looking at some reference. So for example, you can use these for the airplanes, and you can combine two thrusters, or you can just create one and copy it onto the surface a couple of times. You know, there are these bigger ones that have more elements such as rings, and then there are smaller ones that you can see used in a lot of movies and video games, right? So depending on the orientation of the surface, the thruster would align onto that. Okay, so we have this, and now let's see where this rocket is. So I'm going to turn off the normals, and I'm going to template the circle. Okay, maybe let's preview the circle and template this one. So since this rocket asset is built right in the center of the world and it's aligned, we can leave the circle as is. Here I'm just going to increase the divisions here to something like 32, so we have a smoother surface. So again, depending on your needs, you can scale it down or up. And if we preview, let's actually turn on this transform. If we preview the thruster, you would now see that it is actually perfectly aligned with this jet engine. So if I increase the radius, it will be bigger at the core, and then if you decrease it, it will be smaller. All right, so let's keep it at 1 and 1 for now, and let's explore other parameters. So right now I increased the uniform scale. Let's actually put this back to 1, so it is more or less right in the center. And if you look at the tip of the thruster, if we play it back, the tip pretty much stays at the same location. It doesn't really jitter, but in some of these high-speed thrusters, you would see that the tip would be jittering forward and backward. So you can kind of add that jitter in here. So if you turn on jitter, you'll now see that it is behaving more like those very rapid expanding and contracting flames. Moreover, you can play with the thickness parameter. If you click this, you would see this thickness that would be behaving according to this ramp. So if I start increasing the thickness here, let's see that it is deleting most of the volume from the center. See, it kind of makes it thinner as I increase or decrease the thickness. So maybe without it, it would be easier to see. Sometimes you have engines like that. If you increase the length, for example, let's set it to 10, or maybe let's set it to 25, you can get a thruster that looks more like this, which is also a pretty popular one. It is mainly more hollow in the center, and it has this kind of outer heat that is mostly visible. So you also have this thickness ramp that can shape this exhaust in a much more interesting way. So for example, we can make the origin thicker. Maybe let's turn off the thickness for now so we can see this. Okay, so this is what it does pretty much. Okay, and then we can also adjust the ending so we can make it also thicker or thinner. You can also do some interesting things. If you change the interpolation mode to B-spline, you can basically shape it more like these curved elements. So we can maybe adjust the length to 15, and we can add one more section in here. Okay, so let's see these. So I'm going to move this a bit closer, so something like 0.05, and this one 0.25, something more like that. And then we can make this a bit lower, something like 0.8, and this one as well. So we get some more interesting shaping here. Okay, and we can also play with the speed. So if you take a look at the jitter speed, you can increase it to higher values. And let's take a look at what this is going to be inside of the actual engine. So I'm going to put a merge node. And I'm going to connect these both to the merge. You can see it works pretty well. We have adjusted the shape slightly, so we can now scale this a bit, and we can also move it in the translate Z a little bit further in, something more like that. Okay, so we got some interesting shape going, some curved thruster. All right, so now let's go into the exhaust tab. So this is where all the fun happens. You can adjust the colors, you can play with noises, and you can make your thruster really special. For example, if we go to this temperature tab where the color is, if I click on the gear, you can use some of these noise presets. So for example, this one would give you more like a bluish thruster. And we can also play with the colors a little bit here. Okay, so maybe let's move this one closer here. I'm going to expand the settings. I'm going to set this position to something like 2.5, and then we can play with the color, something like 0.325, 585, and 0.9. Make it more blue like that. And we can also adjust the temperature scale. So if we reduce this, it's going to be less bright. So I'm going to set this to something like 3.5. And also you can see that right at the edge, if I turn off this container, so I'm going to click and hold on this icon and turn it to smooth shaded, you can see that we can still see the bright edge of the volume. You can actually get rid of this if you click on scale along length, and now you can also set some kind of ramp in here by reducing the end. You can see now that we have a much cleaner looking thruster. Okay, so this is what we have at the moment. So now let's take a look at the noise. So you can see the noise has some familiar parameters such as element size. So if you start reducing it, you're going to get these smaller noise shapes inside. It has the overall strength, so you can adjust it in here. I'm going to keep the strength to 1 for now, and I'm going to reduce the element size to 0.05, so we have much smaller of these shapes. And then this axis size is pretty interesting. You can stretch this noise along the thruster direction, or you can also squash it. So for example, if you increase the element size like that, and then you start to squash it, it will almost feel like there are some chunks of hot energy going through. Maybe we should also turn off the jitter scale in here, jitter length, just to see it. Yeah, so this is more like what this noise is going to do. And then in the exhaust tab, again, if we start reducing the axis, it will start stretching it more like that. Okay, so the other interesting parameter is going to be the blend. So let me set the exhaust axis to a pretty low number so it's more stretched. And then I'm going to set the element size also lower, 0.05. And I'm going to turn off this home grid so we can see the thruster better. So you can see we have these pretty much very straight noise lines, which kind of feels that the noise is just cutting through this thruster. But if you turn on the blend, and if you start playing with the blend amount, while you increase the blend, it will feel like this noise is getting attracted more into the center, and it will make this look much more interesting. So you can see now we get much more interesting shape rather than just having it to be cutting through in a straight way. All right, so I'm going to keep these like that, and then obviously you can use contrast and cutoff to increase the cuts of the noise through the volume. I'm going to turn these off for now because I don't think I'm going to use these. The other interesting parameter is this center fall off ramp. So it will basically limit the noise as it gets out of the core. So if you start reducing this, you can see that as the noise gets further from the core, we're starting to get less noise on the outer edge. So now you can see mainly the core is going to be noised up. So if I start reducing it even more, you would see that we see this kind of noisy energy only in the center. And then if you put it outward, it's going to be more like this. So I'm going to set it to somewhere like here. It's like a nicer balance. All right, and what else can we do with this? Maybe we can adjust the color a bit more. So I'm going to set this end color to something more like purple, something like 0.5, 0, and 1. So we get some interesting shape. Okay, so we got this. Now there is also a distortion. So distortion would mainly adjust the position of the voxels in 3D space. So you can see now the distortion, when I turn it on, it offsets the shape up and down and also in Z-axis, and it will basically add this kind of more distorted, interesting look. So we can also adjust the element size. These noise settings would work very similar. I usually like to reduce this quite a lot, and then we can maybe adjust this also to be more stretched like that. So you get some distortion of the shape. Maybe let's adjust it more like that. Okay, so for example, we got this, and let's take a look. We got some interesting thruster going. And again, if you want this to calculate a bit faster, you can go to the General tab and increase the voxel to make the processing a bit faster. Okay, so at this point we looked at pretty much all of the settings in the General tab. We checked out the exhaust settings, and now let's quickly focus on this particles tab. So if I enable show guide, and if I put my display flag onto the pyro exhaust, we will see some particles coming out from the source. You can basically increase the amount of particles, you can have them stretched a bit more, and if you want to have a better preview, you can just drag and put a null onto the second output of the pyro exhaust, and then you would see these particles like that. These points are generated procedurally. They are not a simulation. Basically, everything that is happening in the pyro thruster exhaust is a procedural effect based on volumes and noises. None of this is a simulation. So this is completely happening in real time. All right, so the particles are being generated and then being deleted procedurally, but they do have some velocity, which is quite useful for different things. So we can adjust the velocity scale, and then we can use these particles, for example, as a starting point for additional PopNet simulation or for sparks generation that can basically complement this thruster engine. All right, we can also add some noise. So the particles are moving in different directions, as you can see here. This might be a little bit too intense. We can maybe reduce it a bit. But there's definitely a lot of things you can do with this. Another use case could be using these points for heat distortion, right? So you would just generally render them in a specific way, and then you apply them to drive the heat distortion in compositing. All right, so this is a quick overview of the particles tab, and we are not going to use it in this case. I'm just going to turn this off, and let's go back to the preview of our raster. So now what if we want to adjust the ending of the thruster and we want to maybe have a different color, a bit more distortion, and we kind of like everything that we did here? Well, it's a very nice system where you can just copy this one. If I'm gonna hold Alt, click and drag, you're gonna copy this thruster, and then we can basically adjust certain parameters. So I'm going to connect it here so we can see it a bit better. And right now it's the exact duplicate of this one, but we're going to modify it. So I'm going to offset it by 2 units forward so we can see it's already here. And I'm going to change its color right away so we can also see the difference here. So I'm going to go to the exhaust tab and I'm going to click on the gear and I'm going to change this to black body. Actually, I'm going to change it to black to orange. Yeah, so let's see. So now we have this. Okay. We can also increase its temperature slightly. So for now, it's not overtaking the other one. We actually want to see it mainly on the edge. So let's play with some settings in here. I actually want to increase the brightness towards the end, so I'm going to change the temperature like that. And I'm going to also change this to B-spline, so we're going to have something more like that. You would notice the end is going to start changing a little bit. Now we're going to increase the distortion strength. Let's see, now we got this. And what else can we do here? We can probably increase the element size. All right, and then we can adjust some of the noise parameters. I can reduce the noise to 0.1, and then the element size could stay the same. Let's see the general tab. What can we change in here to make it look more interesting? Yeah, I think we can reduce the uniform scale here so it's not as big. Okay, so we got something more like that. And we can also adjust some thickness to 0.75. Okay, and now we should probably see both. I think when we merge it like that, it kind of overrides the colors. So the other way we can take a look at these three. So I can put a display flag on my main rocket, and then I can hold Control and Shift and click on the template, and then I can do the same thing, Control Shift and click on the template. So now you would see that we now have this kind of more orangey ending. Let's also enable the jitter on the exhaust. So we have both jittering, and there we go. So we have now a more interesting and unique thruster just by combining 2 layers. Okay, so now after we played with the settings and kind of got familiar with different areas, let's try and replicate something like this.